Hi, I'm Drew.
And I'm Sam.
And welcome to Drewling Samantics.
Hello, mate. Here I am. How you doing?
I'm very, very well. I have to say something though, Sam, immediately. For those people not joining us on YouTube, here I am, little Drew, sat on the sofa dreams.
Yes.
And Sam, where are you, mate?
I'm in my flat. Why?
Exactly my point. We are recording an episode of Drewling Samantics.
Yeah.
You're in the flat, and I'm not with you. What is going on?
We're gonna create some sort of a rumor, mate, that I'm not allowed to be in my flat on my own. I have to have you here as like an escort. And oh no, not escort. No. Oh my, what have I said? 15 seconds into a bloody episode, and I've already committed some sort of weird sin. I didn't mean escort, like as in. Oh,
I think. Do you mean sort of chaperone?
Yeah, we'll go with that. Oh God, maybe I shouldn't be allowed here on my own because I end up saying weird things. Yes, I am here in my flat. Couldn't be in the studio today due to various logistical issues. But yes, I'm in the flat. Sadly, without you, we're not on my sofas having a chat, but we are still here. Zooming away, you are on the sofa of dreams as per usual. Yes, and I've slightly relocated temporarily due to some work stuff. But anyway, mate, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very, very good. Yeah, and you just mentioned work. I'm quite busy this past week or so. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. I'm a little bit frazzled, running from here to there, but as are you. Hence in the flat. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, we've sort of alluded to it before, but work does tend to be like buses, doesn't it? You're waiting for one, doesn't come, and then all of a sudden 3 or 4 arrive at once. But right. Not one to look a gift horse in the mouth or to be seen to be complaining. I am very, very glad that I'm so busy and working so much. As are you, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I'm absolutely delighted. Yeah, absolutely delighted to be. Yeah.
And speaking of being busy, we are lucky enough today to be joined by a guest who is an equally busy person and has, I think it's safe to say, some unique elements to his career thus far. I mean, he's just done some incredible things. Now, I've been lucky enough to work with this gentleman a fair few times in the past. He's a good friend of mine. Haven't spoken to him for a little while due to sort of things getting in the way and whatever. So I'm really looking forward to a catch up. But I know you're equally excited because he's got some amazing stories and some amazing things in his background.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know this gentleman terribly well, but I've done a little bit of research, as one does, and it's like, oh, he's done that, no, oh, he's done that. So it's be like, oh, yeah. So it's coming at the industry from, as you say, from lots of different angles. So this, yeah, it'd be very, very interesting. Good fun. Looking forward to it.
As am I. And the good news is we don't have to look forward anymore because he's actually here. He's ready to go. So what do you reckon? Shall we let him in and have a chat?
I think we should. Shall we go for it?
Here we go. And there he is. We are joined by the fantastic Mr. Richard Stride, who I have not seen in forever. How are you, sir?
I know. It has to feel like it's been forever almost. I don't know how many years it is that I've worked with you. God, it must be
more than we need to mention. That's
yeah.
But it is wonderful to see you this morning. Thank you.
You look exactly the same. So I don't know how you do that, you know.
Amazing. Check is in the
post. Lots of oil of boule.
I think you've got a lot of work done, Richard. A lot of work done in those interim years.
Yes. Whereas me, of course, you know, I when I last saw him, I probably only was about 21.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and now that you're 23, you don't look much different either, Rich.
Are you charm, are you?
It's amazing to see you. As said, Drew meet Richard, Richard meet Drew.
Hello, Richard.
Drew, an old friend of mine, and Richard, an old friend of mine, actually. So you're in good company today. But
you have friends.
Yeah. Oh God. Here we. What I'm discovering, the more and more I do this, is when I bring people on that I've worked with before, they actually gang up on me. I don't know why. No. Honestly, Richard, it's wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us on Drewling Samantics. And I guess the way we should start is the way we always start, is for those poor, unfortunate souls who have not met you before or are not familiar with your incredibly varied and entertaining career. Can you give us a little bit of an intro to who Mr. Richard Stride is, please?
Yes, I guess so. So when I was born, apparently, I came out and looked straight towards the light. So everyone knew I was going to be an actor. But yes, no, I sort of fell into acting at a later stage, probably when I was about 14, 15. Did the old thing of going to a local theatre group and all of that. Then went on to drama school, which I absolutely adored and loved. That was at the Academy of Live Recorded Arts, which unfortunately is now closed, but it was an amazing experience. Absolutely brilliant. Loved every moment. And then came out of there. And my first job was working on a big Hollywood film. I was doing sword fighting and various other bits and pieces on it, and had a cough and a spit, and got to work with Sean Connery, Julia Ormond, and Richard Gere, which was a baptism of fire, somewhat.
Just a bit, yeah.
Yeah, just a bit, yeah. And then went off and did some TIE, some theatre and education, which again was brilliant because it taught me a lot about, particularly when you've got a young audience, is that they don't lie. You know, if you went to various big theatres and you go and see various shows, etc., the audience will always clap at the end. Children don't. If they don't like it, I'm bored. And so I learned a lot of comedy there. I learned a lot of how you build comic lines up and everything else and what have you. And then did lots of various shows, plays, theatre, TV, film, etc. After that. And then one thing that I was particularly lacking at the time and I loved was Shakespeare. And so I decided in 1999, I think it was, to start up a theatre group and do some Shakespeare. So we did a Shakespeare festival, put on loads of Shakespeares, etc. I was in 2 of the Shakespeare productions. One was Othello and one was Twelfth Night. And that was the birth of my theatre, if you like, Groundlings Theatre. So we started that, and that was really going to be a one-off. That was just going to be one thing, and then it was so popular and did so well that I felt obliged to carry it on. So then there was another Shakespeare season and another, and so forth. And then we had a drama training course as well for young actors and older actors as well. And then eventually I bought an old burnt-out wreck of a building, which... you know, most people were saying, Richard, you've never even decorated your bedroom, let alone rebuild a theatre from the ashes, literally from the ashes. I mean, it had absolutely nothing in it. Nothing worked. Walls were falling down. I fell through 2 floors at one point. I threw off my shoes at one point and they went straight through the wallpaper down the cavity. And it was just, I mean, we had a tree growing out the side of it. I mean, it was just madness, utter madness to do this. I spent about 380,000, I think it was, on doing the building up. And this was all in the middle of a financial crash as well. So it was great timing. And everyone just kept saying, this is impossible, you're going to lose loads of money, it's a bad idea. I didn't have one person that said this was a good idea, but I managed to pull it together somehow and turn it into a successful theatre. And I think one of the things that made it work so well was actually I did a lot of research for about 1.5 years. Thank God for the internet. And though I'd never run a theatre before, it's amazing what you can learn off the internet. And I looked at best practices of theatres, most successful theatres. I just Googled a lot. And there was one thing that I started to realise from all my 1.5 years of research is that people had stopped going to the theatre, not because of television, which is what I think everybody thought was the reason. Yes, it did have an impact, but actually people stopped it started to drift off going before television really got a hold. And that, you know, it was more in most people's households. And what had lacked from theatre was socialisation, if you like. people used to go to the theatre an hour before the show. They used to stay an hour after the show. And it's that community feel. So what I did is I basically took the idea of taking out all the rows and put round tables in, so that the interesting thing is normally if you go to the theatre, the only thing you're ever going to say to anyone next to you is, "Excuse me, I need the loo," and that's it. Whereas now people are facing each other on a round table, and the first thing they do is they introduce themselves, and then they have nothing in common except for the fact that they're at the theatre. So guess what? They start talking about the theatre. And so they become your sales team, if you like, your marketing team. And then basically people started to come earlier. They started to stay later, buy more drinks at the bar, blah, 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 blah. And our ticket sales just rocketed. They went up every single year. And they went up by at least 10%. And one year they went up by 130%.
Wow.
And I think it's just putting on really good productions with really good actors. And that's what I also did with casting. I mean, it's interesting now, it's all becoming a fad now, but I did what I called blind casting. So if I had a show with 10 actors in, or 10 characters, and I needed 10 actors, I would audition, say, 100 actors. And I wouldn't think, oh, well, that person be good for that role and that person be good for that role. I just went for the 10 best actors, regardless of their age, their sex, their height, their look, their colour of their skin, whether they're able-bodied, disabled, etc. Didn't make any difference to me. Go and get the 10 best actors. And so I'd cast these 10 best actors. And then after I'd cast them, I'd then sit down with my 10 roles and my 10 actors and go, which one could play what, which is best suited for what character, etc. And that's predominantly how I worked. And the interesting thing is you could have, I remember we cast Romeo and Juliet, and we had a Lady Capulet who was, her origin was Black African. The Lord Capulet was white, and the Juliet was Asian. So in most people's minds, that wouldn't necessarily work because of the different ethnic backgrounds that they had. But nobody brought that up. Nobody, because they were such good actors. They just made it believable.
Yeah.
And no one questioned it. None of the audience turned around and said, well, that's a bit strange casting. No one questioned it at all. And that was the most amazing thing that struck me, is that actually whatever you give to an audience, they will believe, as long as you've got good actors in place at that time.
Yeah.
And that for me was, in some ways, really, really, I was passionate about at sort of promoting and trying to hope that maybe the industry might come along with it and actually start thinking about, let's just get the best actor in, regardless of who they are, what they look like, what age they are, what size they are, what color of their skin is, etc. And that's really where I was trying to aim and do. So I ran the theatre for 10 years, and then I started to get itchy feet, just before the pandemic, and then wanted to just be an actor again, because it was lovely running the theatre and doing all those amazing things and doing the events and doing all different kind of meeting lots of different people. But it can be tricky when you're playing Hamlet to suddenly in the interval have to unblock a toilet and then go and take more money to the bar because they've run out of change. And it doesn't give you a lot of time to actually think about, what you're doing on stage. And then you're also thinking halfway through the show, thinking, I need to get another prop there, or I need to fix that bit of scenery, or whatever it is. And and I need to give a note to that other actor about that. And you're in the middle of doing, to be or not to be. And I need to give a note to myself. So I wanted to do something for myself, because I was getting older and wanted to go back and just be an actor again. So literally just before the pandemic, I decided to create a trust that would then run the theatre, which now do. And basically now I'm just treading the boards again, as it were, or going on screen. So I've managed to get myself a incredible agent who is just absolutely brilliant, and I've had lots of lovely auditions, and been so supportive, and really, really supportive, and got some incredible auditions along the route and what have you. And I last year I auditioned for a major new streaming service television series for the lead, which was incredible because it was playing the President Roosevelt.
Wow.
So
Great.
it was the main role. I mean, the thing was called Roosevelt, so it was.
There's a hint there.
Yeah,
There's a hint there, yeah. Which was just. I mean, I think both myself and my agent were just so astounded. I even got an audition, let alone anything else. And I got recalled, and then I got recalled again, and so forth, and ended up down to the final two, which was amazing. I didn't get it, but the fact that I got that far, and they're auditioning across the whole of America, Canada, the UK, South Africa as well, was just amazing, and it gave me such a boost. And I think that's important, is that when you go into auditions, it's a lovely opportunity to try out and play and do your craft, because that's what it's all about. So you get the job, that's the cherry on the cake.
Yeah,
really.
that's the extra little cherry on top.
Nice bit. Yeah.
But it's like you say, it's sorry. It's like you say, it's that get a good actor. It doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, whatever. It just get the actor, which is obviously what they saw in you. They wanted the best, and they were looking at a good actor.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, UK, Canadian, or otherwise. I think.
Yeah, exactly. And you can learn the accent. I mean, he had a very unique accent. He had a Mid-Atlantic, Locust Valley, lockjaw American accent, which actually doesn't exist now. It's very much like James Stewart type of accent. And it's very strange and really quite difficult to do. But I've managed to get a lot of tapes of him speaking and look at the certain words that he was doing. Like he would say war, and he would do a strange thing with Hitler. So it's almost like a posh way of saying Hitler, but it was American as well. So that's the Mid-Atlantic.
Yeah, twang.
Yeah, that twang. And it was locking onto those. But I managed to, I had 2 days to learn a 9-page speech. Wow. And to do the accent as well. But I literally had 2 days of non-stop listening to him constantly and just getting that accent, as bang on as you can. And that's the thing that, again, is brilliant. Isn't it lovely that they have thought, well, actually, we're not just going to go for American actors. Let's look at actors across the globe and see if, what they can do with it as well. So, and that's where I think, with the theatre, is what I'd love to see is to see us playing different roles. And, and I remember going to the Globe Theatre and watching Twelfth Night, and there was a young actor, there was an oldish man who played Malvolio. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was quite small and quite short. And then there was one point where he came down into the audience, and of course, of the Globe, you stand in the sort of groundlings area, if you like. And then he walked past me, and I was literally about 2 feet away from him, and I suddenly clocked it was a girl.
Wow!
And I had no clue, absolutely no clue. And I mean, that is an incredible actress. Because that's what it's about, is being something you're not.
Is it picking up on that? I mean, sorry for interrupting. It's like if you do cast, not necessarily against type, but an actor that you wouldn't expect to be playing that role, you get actors bring some, because then an actor. I mean, I've been sort of like not crowbarred into a role, but you go, I wouldn't expect to be playing this. But then that actor then starts to think and bring something extra to the role that is not expected. And that then makes it exciting for an audience and for the actor, because the audience go, well, I wouldn't have expected she to be playing that role, and suddenly she is bringing so much more than the accepted, typecast, if you like. And but it keeps, and then you get those exciting moments, as you say, when someone walks past and you go, my God, that's an amazing piece of casting and an amazing piece of acting as well. So much more exciting.
It is, and it's thinking outside it's just about trying to take the blinkers off and think outside the norm. So, the classic thing that everyone does is when they're casting, say, Alice in Wonderland, they look for a blonde-haired girl to play Alice. Well, if you actually look at the research and go back, Alice actually had black hair. She didn't have blonde hair. It was only Disney that gave her blonde hair. So we tend to think of these things in a certain way. And what you have to do is almost look at it completely fresh. It's the same thing with Romeo and Juliet, the famous balcony scene, which doesn't actually exist because there is no balcony scene in Romeo and Juliet. There's no mention in all of Shakespeare's 37 plays of a balcony. Doesn't exist. In fact, in Elizabethan England, they didn't have balconies. So therefore, he wouldn't have known them. And the line says, what light through yonder window breaks. So she's looking out of a window. She's not looking out of a balcony. But, for whatever reason, we've now know that as the balcony scene. And that's what we think all the time. But that's just not the case.
Incredible.
So, it's about sort of taking away our perceptions, if you like, or preconceived ideas about how things should be done and looking at them with fresh eyes and trying to forget what's been done before, but look at it new, if you like. And that's what's exciting.
So to take it opposite of new, though, I'm going to take you back because obviously we've touched on, you've mentioned Groundlings Theatre, which was your baby that you developed from this burnt out old building. You also mentioned the fact that Groundlings is a term that has come from the people who stand on the ground to watch Shakespeare in the Globe, and that's where it sort of got its name. But the Groundlings Theatre, and I'm incredibly lucky that I got to work there on numerous occasions with you. And in fact, I owe you a debt of gratitude because you gave me my first ever professional credit. And now Drew's going to probably chime in and say, so you're the one that's responsible for this idiot. But
it flashed through my mind, and then I thought, no, that would be churlish, both to you and to Richard. So not saying it. Not saying
it. Can't have been a mistake if the two of us were involved in the decision. But so I was very lucky to work at Groundlings on numerous occasions at the theatre. So I know a few of the stories behind it, but I will obviously give you the opportunity to tell our followers, fans, listeners, etc., and Drew as well, who I'm not sure knows the full stories, about what was the Old Benny, if I'm remembering rightly, and that's how it began.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So it started life in 1784. So this was before the theatre ban was lifted, which basically stated that you weren't allowed to put on productions for more than 90 days, I think it was, in a year. So it made it very difficult for theatres in some ways to be able to put on shows because they can only be open for 90 days. So you often get theatres disguised, and they were called halls. And sometimes they would put on music. And so they were known as music halls, which is where we get the term musical from.
Yes.
And so this place particularly, the person who started it, whose name was John Shakespeare, funny enough, he was passionate about theatre, but he was also passionate about education. So he had a hall upstairs with a stage on, and then downstairs was a schoolhouse. So it became known as the Old Beneficial Society Hall. Then probably round about, because it was a Georgian sort of theatre, and then probably round about the 1880s, some point round about then, the school was bursting at the seams, but the theatre wasn't particularly doing so well because they built all these lovely Matcham theatres that had exploded across the city. And so suddenly, and they were bigger, and they had scenery that can go up and down, and that, so that suddenly that became much more attractive, and so it wasn't particularly doing very well. So it then the obvious thing that happened was, let's convert the theatre side into a schoolhouse, which is what they did. And then in I think it was in the 1960s, it closed as a school and then became an adult education centre. And then about 2005 or 2004, I think it was, some youth had thrown a firework into the school and burnt it down, literally. So all that remained was literally a shell. It was boarded up, forgotten about, until I bought it in 2010 and then started the restoration on it and that. So that's basically, so it has this incredible, unique history as it went through. And we started doing things like repainting the sky ceiling that would have been there and trying to go back as much as we could to how it would have looked over 200 years ago.
Wow.
So, and it was difficult because obviously there wasn't many photographs, and there wasn't any photographs of when it was before it all became a school. So we had to rely on anecdotal evidence and what people said and things like that, and look at other Georgian theatres and see how they were and so forth. Yes, so that's basically what we did. And then thought, how can we make this work in a modern way? And the lovely thing about it, because it didn't have a tiring house, it didn't have that method of putting scenery up or down, is I used to design all the sets. So it was fascinating because it actually, sorry, I'm just going to tap my screen because it went a bit funny then. It gave you restrictions. And actually sometimes if you've got obstacles in the way when you're trying to design a set, it's fascinating because you come up with better ideas. If you think, oh, I can just bring that piece of scenery in, you tend to go, well, that's what I'll do. I'll just bring it in because that's easy. But when you don't have that option, you have difficulties and problems that need solving. You have to think in a new way of, how do I get multiple scenes on a stage which has no wing space and no fly system?
Yeah.
And then it makes you think in a different way. And that's what I used to love about it, was the fact that it wasn't the perfect space, because it made it more interesting for me. Yeah. So yeah.
And
I love the fact that you said, I mean, it's something I believe in, it, that a theatre is a social occasion. People used to go to the theatre, as you say, to socialise, but to be seen and to be with people. In Shakespeare's times, it was very much a promenade for the wealthy and for the groundlings and those in the pit to trade or whatever, and or to steal. There was a whole diverse community whacked in the theatre. And I mean, I've always found working in, and I've toured a lot, done a lot of touring and stuff, and you go, all those theatres that have an audience, a following, they have a before and after life. The doors are open during the day. I knew a vicar once, and as a confirmed atheist, people will go, really? But his vicar said to me, he said, my church is full on a Sunday because the doors are open during the week. Yeah. And I always thought a theatre's like that. A theatre is full at night if the doors are open during the day. If you've got people going in there having cups of tea and reading newspapers, and I worked in one theatre where they had a reading room during the day and flasks of tea and coffee, and I never knew how these were filled up, but they just appeared, and people sitting there reading newspapers. And then they started to put shelves of plays and play scripts, and then they had this week's play was there to be read, so people read it, then they go, I've got to see it tonight. And slowly but surely they built their audience up. It just grew and grew and grew, because people just wanted to be in the building all the time, and they didn't want to go home at night, or they wanted to be there to see what was going. It was such a wonderful idea. And as you said yourself, bar sales went up, all those things that helped to fund a theatre. So I love the idea that you created this hub and got the audiences to just enjoy being in the building. Because I think we're lacking that nowadays. We're lacking, in a lot of our theatres, people just they think it's expensive, but if they've enjoyed the building during the day, or they can enjoy it. It's their building, they own it. Then you can bring your prices down because they're there
You're
anyway.
putting more seats. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. So I love that ethic. I think that's a great thought.
I think that's for me one of the things that I always loved about being at Groundlings was that it had a much less commercial feel than perhaps traditional theatre or modern theatre. It had a family feel. You had volunteers that worked there because they liked the atmosphere and they liked to hear the stories and they had involvement. And then you had groups who were being taught. There were acting lessons going on and acting groups that happened. But then all the stories and all the history, I mean, things like, and you'll be able to tell it obviously much better than I will, Richard, but the fact that the wardrobe department, I want to say, is one of the biggest in Europe when it was fully functional. Is that right? Or one of the biggest in the UK?
I would say it was probably one of the biggest in Hampshire, certainly. We have, so we had 11,500 costumes, which I now have because the trust decided they didn't want to run a wardrobe anymore. So I now have 11,500 costumes, which I'm currently selling, which is an immense. So every sort of 10 weeks, I do a big sale. So it is great because those costumes now that we built up over the 20 years are now getting used. And, it was the other day, someone sent me a photograph of one of the costumes that I sent to America. That someone bought, and there was this little girl just absolutely enthralled by this amazing costume, looking up at this lady that was dressed in this costume, and it was just absolutely brilliant. And he said, it's been fantastic. He bought, I think, 3 or 4 costumes off me, and he said it's been absolutely fantastic getting them out. And he just said it's brought so much joy to their community. I just wanted to send you a photo to say thank you. And that's what I love to see, is the fact that these aren't going to end up just in a warehouse stuck there doing nothing, that they're actually going to get used and going to be carrying on, etc. And that's brilliant. So that's really good.
Yeah, it was always an experience coming to do a show or being involved in a show, because you'd have that moment where going, right, we're now going to go into wardrobe, we're going to find things for this production, and you're like, oh my god, this is an event in itself. The busiest room full of more than you can possibly imagine. And then you have the stories of it's one of the most haunted buildings in the area. That's another.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So I mean, that was the other good thing, is we used to get a lot of ghost hunters all the time. So we weren't just being used during the day; we're actually being used during the night. And they were brilliant because also they were our security at night time, because someone was in the building, which was fantastic to be able to have people going around looking for ghosts. And so it meant that it was less chance for it being burgled or vandalized or anything else, because there was someone there pretty much 24/7. And that was fantastic. And it was another income, and also, more importantly, it was another way of getting other people into the building for the first time to see the shows, because people would learn about the history on the ghost hunts. They would do all their research and everything that they would do, but then they would also pick up a leaflet and go, might come back and see this. So you bring in really diverse people, and it was surprising how far people traveled. We had people traveling from London, from France even. They would come across on a ferry, from Cherbourg and places like that, and they would come and watch some live theatre. It was just extraordinary how far people came. Absolutely extraordinary. And I used to say to people, put a pin on where the theatre is, draw a circle round by 100 miles, that's your advertising. But people wouldn't come from that far. They do. They do. Yeah. Incredible. And interestingly enough, 60% of our audience came from outside of the city. More people came from outside the city than did from within the city itself. And I think that's slightly to do with the fact that when you live in a city, how often do you go to the tourist attractions, for instance? Yeah. But you tend to travel to another city. So, How many Londoners have been to, for instance, the Tate Modern, or have been to Madame Tussauds? Probably not that many. But then take everywhere else around, there's loads. So it's very, very strange. If it's on your doorstep, you don't tend to use it so much. But if it's further away, it's an event that you travel to. And that was something I learned as well, about advertising and about getting people involved.
So I want to do one more thing. I appreciate that your time is incredibly valuable, and we really grateful that you've given some up to speak to us today. There's one thing in particular I want to talk to you before I know you've got to run off. And it's slightly different to things we've been talking about. So obviously your main passion, or your initial passion, was theatre and creating the theatre itself and running the theatre. But you also have a rather special connection to what's probably considered the biggest, if not one of the biggest, franchises in the film world. And people I know will want to hear about this. So would you mind giving us a bit more information about that?
Yes. So when I was at drama school, I wrote to loads of people, I wrote to thousands of people. And one person I thought, I always believe, why not aim high? Because if you aim high, you'll get somewhere in between. If you aim down here, you're only going to get from there to there. But if you aim high, you just might get somewhere, you know. So I wrote to Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and all those different people. And I surprisingly got from the big people, if you like, or the people at the top of their game, got letters back. I was like, what? Some of the smaller people I didn't get letters from. But some of the big people I did. Maybe everyone's not writing to them because they think they're so big and so unattainable that that's the reason why. I don't know. But anyway, I got a letter back from George Lucas, and I said it in my letter. I said to him, if you ever think about doing any more Star Wars movies, then I would love to be involved, you know, in any way, shape or form. You know, I'll play a bit of dust on a TIE fighter, if you like. He wrote back and said, and this was about, I think, 93, he wrote back and said, we are actually looking at doing some new Star Wars movies. I thought, wow, I haven't heard that on the grapevine. So I wrote back again and said, right, here's my show reel, here's my stuff and what have you. And he said, well, do get in contact, you know, when you hear about the casting, etc. So I was all excited. And then I wrote again, and then one particular day I got a phone call from my agent and said, you have a casting at, I think it was Ealing Studios in 1 hour. And I'm like, oh, blimey, I don't know if I can get there on time. And I said, well, I don't know, but it might be tricky to get there in an hour. They said, it's for Star Wars. I went, I'm there.
Yeah.
I don't know how many speed cameras I went through, but I got there. And I walked into a room and there was George Lucas. Wow. And I was like, oh my God. And I did a reading for them and what have you. And he said, how would you like to be Obi-Wan's Kenobi's double in Star Wars? And I went, yeah. So I literally went from an hour from finding out the audition to getting the role. So I played Obi-Wan Kenobi's double. But I also, on set, ended up doing Poggle the Lesser. I played half the Imperial clone troopers at the time. In fact, there's one scene where Samuel Jackson in episode 2 jumps off I'm never very good at remembering what these things are called. All the fans do. They come and when we do signings, all the fans remember everything. They know more about it than I do. Jumped off one of these sort of transporter military things. And there's about, I think, 8 clone troopers around him at the time. I'm every single clone trooper. What? Every single one. Yeah. Being doubled up so many times. And then I was also a female sort of C-3PO at one point. And I read in for loads of characters, you know, for the actors to respond to and things like that. So I did loads of that and just basically was just on set all the time. Absolutely loved it. Never went back to the green room. In fact, I don't even know what the green room looked like because I just spent my whole time sat behind George Lucas and was there ready to do whatever he needs me to do. And I learned so much in all those months of working on it. and how he worked, how the whole thing worked. I went and asked questions. I was probably quite annoying, really, but I'd like go to the crew and go, "How's that work? And what's that?" And it was just such an immense education. The whole thing, absolutely brilliant. Met some most amazing people. Obviously, Ewan McGregor and Natalie Portman and Samuel Jackson and of course the great Christopher Lee. And had a scene with him. A couple of scenes with him, and he was just hilarious, absolutely hilarious, and very funny, very complimentary, and very, very supportive. He was absolutely brilliant, and it was just the most incredible experience. And at the time, it was doing the prequels. It was breaking new technology. It was the first time those cameras had ever been used. It was. And a lot of it was green screen and blue screen. I suppose because of my theatre background, I found it not too difficult because you just imagine what's around you. Because you literally were in a blue box, and half the time you had no idea what planet you were on, let alone
Literally.
what was flying around you or anything else. No clue. Yeah. And the only reference points you have might be someone with a stick with a ping pong ball on the end of it, just moving across, so that you knew where to look. That was it. That was literally it.
Wow. What an incredible experience. I mean, not only satisfied with creating a theatre from basically nothing, you've also then spent your time on sets with Hollywood royalty in arguably the biggest franchise ever. So, but you could try and leave something for the rest of us to do, Rich. Like, rather than taking it all for yourself.
It's just I'm not leaving the set. I'm staying here until I've done everything.
Exactly. I think the trick is knock on enough doors and one will open. Just keep writing, my advice to actors, just keep writing emails, keep talking to people, just keep knocking doors. Don't give up. Because if you knock 100 doors, one of them will open, and that you only need one. And that is just a numbers game, really. It's just as simple and basic as that. Absolutely. So, start knocking.
Well, Richard, thank you so very, very much, because I've loved meeting you, and it's been fascinating and interesting and inspiring.
Thank you. You too.
And we know that we know you're, as Sam said, you're a very busy man. Obviously, another set to get to pick up the slack from all these Hollywood stars. But whilst you've been doing all these amazing things, and we always ask it of our guests, you must have thousands. We just need one. Give us an anecdote. Give us a story that that makes you smile, makes others smile, or you dine out on. But I can't wait to hear what you may have to tell us.
Well, I think my favorite anyway was on the set of Star Wars, and I was playing Poggle the Lesser that particular day, which is a sort of, I describe him as a cockroach sort of character. And sometimes had to do it in the Poggle voice, and sometimes I had to do it in English so that Christopher Lee could understand what I was saying. And I had this little disc thing, was probably like a little sort of flying saucer, which was the Death Star plans. And it was the big reveal of building the Death Star and all this sort of thing. So it was quite an important scene. And I had to take it, and I had to walk around this imaginary round table, which obviously wasn't there. But also I had to step over all these wires that were connected on the other side of the table to these creatures, which had animatronics in them, and they had wires connecting to the different parts of their faces, etc. So you had to be really careful, because if you stood on one of those wires, then they would sort of go into spasm like this, what have you. So I had to navigate all these wires to get round, hand this thing over to Christopher Lee and say, the Jedi must not find out about our plans for the ultimate weapon, otherwise we're doomed, like this. And that was the scene. Well, there was a lot of technical stuff obviously going on. We did a lot of rehearsals, etc. And while I was there, I happened to say to the prop guy who handed me these Death Star plans, I said, well, it's amazing, isn't it? What these guys do. I said, I'm in awe. I said, not only they've created this sort of plastic thing, and they've got a little light inside, and someone had to design it and make it and create it, and the work that goes into that is just awe-inspiring. Well, the prop guy started laughing, and both myself, Chris and Lee said, "What's so funny? What we missed?" And he said, "Well, actually," he said, "yesterday we forgot all about the Death Star plans," and he said we hadn't made anything. So we nipped into Halfords, and it's actually just basically a £1 car air freshener from Halfords. We've taken out the air freshener bit and just put a little red light in it, and that's it. So we came to the next scene, and instead of saying my lines, because we were rehearsing it just over and over again, and no one was recording, I handed them to Christopher Lee, and I just said, "There we go, sire, something to freshen the whole galaxy with." And he wet himself, and he couldn't stop laughing all day. And I would come across, do the line to him in recordings, and he couldn't get the line out. He was absolutely hysterics, and it took an entire day to film that scene. So I must have cost Lucasfilm a lot of money that day. Very unprofessional, but it was funny. And it was, and I think if anything, it just showed that it was such a great family atmosphere on there, and people were playing pranks all the time, and having so much fun making it. So, but yeah, and it was lovely to see Christopher Lee was such a sport. He really was, but absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic! I love that. There we are. Yeah. Just not only cheering up Drewling Samantics, but also cheering up the galaxy. Thank you for that, Richard.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Rich, it's always a pleasure to catch up. But equally, thank you so much for joining us on the show, and I'm sure that the pleasure will be echoed by all our listeners and watchers.
Thank you.
What a fantastic opportunity to hear some incredible stories about someone who just loves their job. Purely that's the biggest thing that comes across, and I'm sure it's the thing that you always want to come across in.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Thank you guys, both of you, so much.
Thank you very much.
Not a problem. Pleasure is ours, and take care, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Yep. Thanks a lot. May the force be with you.
May the force be with you. Take care, Rich. See you.
Have a good one.
Bye-bye. Now, I'm not going to say anything here apart from the fact that, as you know, I've never seen, and I didn't say this to Richard because I've never seen Star Wars, anything, apart from half an hour of the first one. And I've always said, I'm not really interested in, but now I just had my interest increased massively by just hearing that wonderful story at the end, but also, I think I'm probably going to have to go and watch them now, aren't I? I mean,
there you go. Yeah, you've got a good few hours of catching up.
Well, as I say, I've got a whole week of not doing nothing, which is not going to happen because I'm very busy at the moment. But what I just I mean, he's obviously got so much more to tell us.
Oh God, we'll have to get him back on to tell even more stories. There's so much, and what I was wondering whether he was going to say, and what a fantastic anecdote to tell, but just to. Almost not spoiler alert, but many weeks ago, in fact, seasons and seasons ago, we were talking about funny moments on stage, and I mentioned one of my funniest moments on stage being a production of The Importance of Being Earnest, where a wonderful actor playing Lady Bracknell lost his wig mid speech and mid interaction, and that is Mr. Richard Stride. He was the one playing Lady Bracknell, losing his wig, and he just dealt with it in such a brilliant way. Very, very talented, very lovely man. Pleasure to have him on the show. So
absolutely, and absolutely loves the business.
Oh,
that's what we like.
Yeah. We always get that feeling from all our guests, but maybe especially so today, which just purely adores what he does, and has done it from so many different angles and so many different areas of the business. So, but yeah.
Well, I mean, we go from a fantastic guest this week, to where are we? What are we doing next week, mate? What's happening?
Well, next week's fairly significant, and we've had a lot of significance in the last few weeks with birthdays and anniversaries and what have yous and big numbers. Next week's our last one, mate. Not ever. Hang on. I've dropped another clanger there, like terrifying people. So it's the end of season 7. Next week is our last last us episode, shall we say, before we have our best of episodes for season 7, which I always look forward to. It's always good fun. Mainly because you actually do come to the flat rather than me being on there, and we get to sit and go back through them all and have a drink or two and reminisce, which is always great fun. But yeah, so next week's going to be a cool one. Bit of reflection or perhaps on the season and a few other bits and plenty of news to catch up on as well, actually, isn't there? So
there is. And news of what we've been doing, because I know as you say, logistically you've been running around like a mad thing, so you can catch me up on that next week. Let me tell you how it's going.
But aside from that, I think I'm going to raise a glass, and I'm sure you'll raise your coffee or tea or whatever you're on.
Coffee in the mug
to another fabulous guest and a fabulous episode.
Absolutely right.
As always, thank you to the Drewling Samantics followers, listeners, watchers for joining us. Come back next week. Last one of the season before some best ofs. It should be a good one.
We'll see you then.
Cheers all.
Cheers.
Thanks again for watching this episode of Drewling Samantics.
Please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video.
Don't forget, we're also available as audio only. Just search Drewling Samantics in any good podcast app. And please support us on social media. All our links and handles are on screen now.
We love welcoming new followers and subscribers, so why not share with your family and friends so they can join in too? Thanks very much. See you next time.